The auditor placed the file on the table the way a man sets down a loaded gun, slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone in the room understood its weight before anyone touched it. $420,000. Mr. Weber. She adjusted her glasses and opened the first page. Every purchase order in this file carries your signature. I looked at the file. Manila folder. Thick. Edges worn from handling. The kind of folder that travels through offices and conference rooms, gathering fingerprints and decisions before it reaches the person whose name is printed on every page inside. My name. Curtis Weber. Typed in bold at the top of each purchase order, followed by a signature that looked like mine but wasn't. The auditor's name was Helen Marsh. Mid-40s, gray blazer, no jewelry except a thin wedding band. She'd arrived at Jefferson Ridge High School at 8 that morning with a banker's box and a county identification badge. By 9:15, she was sitting in the principal's office across from me, laying out 4 years of financial records like evidence at a trial. Dale Prescott stood behind her near the window, arms folded, his expression arranged into concern. The kind of concern a man practices in a mirror before entering a room. "Curtis," he said, his voice soft and steady. "We'll get this sorted out. I'm sure there's an explanation." I didn't answer him. I was looking at the signatures on the purchase orders, the capital C in Curtis, the long tail on the W in Weber, the slight rightward slant I'd developed from 30 years of writing on clipboard forms held against my hip. Whoever forged these had studied my handwriting carefully, very carefully. But the final stroke on the W was wrong. I always pull downward. The forger pulled sideways. A small difference. The kind of thing only the man who wrote it would notice. I carry 46 keys on a steel ring clipped to my belt. Every classroom, every storage closet, every utility room, the boiler room, the gymnasium, the cafeteria kitchen, the front entrance, the loading dock. 46 keys to every door in Jefferson Ridge High School. I've carried them for 28 years. The ring weighs 1 pound and 4 ounces. I know because I weighed it once when Tyler asked me how heavy it was. 28 years. I started here at 29. The same year my daughter Megan was born. Worked my way through every hallway, every pipe, every electrical panel in this building. Replaced 1,100 ceiling tiles. Fixed 316 window locks. Painted the gymnasium floor 9 times. Repaired the boiler 4 times and replaced it twice. Every repair logged in a notebook. Every cost recorded in my own handwriting. 28 notebooks. 1 for each year, stacked on a shelf in my workshop at home. My father was a maintenance worker at the textile mill in Colton until it closed. He taught me 2 things. First, measure twice, cut once. Second, every job done right is dignity earned. I've lived by those words for 57 years. Now a woman in a gray blazer was telling me I'd stolen $420,000 from the school where I'd spent more than half my life keeping the lights on and the toilets running. "Mr. Weber," Helen Marsh said. "Do you have anything to say?" I looked up from the signatures. "Those aren't mine," I said. Dale shifted near the window. "Curtis," he said, stepping forward with one hand raised, a calming gesture, pastoral, like a preacher settling a nervous congregation. "I know this is a lot to process. I've asked Helen to give us a few days before she files anything formal. We'll review everything together." He put his hand on my shoulder. The weight of it felt different than it used to. Heavier. More deliberate. "I know you were doing your late rounds alone last Thursday night. Dale said. That's when some of these orders were processed. We just need to account for the timing. I looked at him. Thursday night. I'd worked the late shift, checking locks and thermostats after the custodial crew left. I did late rounds every Thursday and every other Monday. Had for years. But I'd never told Dale my exact schedule. He was the principal, not the facilities manager. There was no reason for him to know which nights I was alone in the building. How do you know my Thursday schedule? I asked. Dale blinked. Just once. Half a second. Then the concern returned, smooth as paint covering a crack in drywall. It's in the staffing log, he said. I review it every month. The staffing log showed general shifts. It didn't show which nights I walked rounds alone. That information was in one place. The weekly schedule I printed and pinned to the bulletin board in the front office. The front office where my wife, Lorraine, worked 3 afternoons a week as the administrative assistant. I stood up. Helen Marsh looked at me with the expression of someone who'd seen guilty men try to leave rooms before. I'm not leaving, I said. I just need to get back to work. There are 2 bathroom faucets leaking on the 2nd floor and a ceiling light flickering in room 212. She nodded slowly. We'll need to speak again. Mr. Weber. I walked out of the principal's office, past the front desk where Lorraine usually sat, through the main hallway with its polished floors and trophy cases. My keys jingled with each step. 46 keys, 28 years, $420,000 I didn't steal. That evening, I pulled into the driveway at 6:15. Same time as always. The porch light was on. The kitchen window glowed warm yellow. Everything in its place. Lorraine stood at the stove stirring chicken soup. She turned when I came in, smiled, wiped her hands on her apron. How was your day? Honey. Her voice was light, easy, not a trace of tension, not a hint that she knew anything about auditors or purchase orders or $420,000 missing dollars from the school where she worked 3 days a week. Fine, I said. I set my keys on the counter. 46 keys, 1 pound, 4 ounces, landing on the granite with a familiar clink. Her phone sat on the kitchen table. Screen up. A notification glowed at the top. One new message from a contact saved as D. Just the letter. No name. Lorraine glanced at the phone, then back at the soup. Her hand moved to the table. She turned the phone face down with a casual motion. Smooth. Practiced. The way someone hides something they've been hiding for a long time. Dinner's almost ready, she said. Go wash up. I walked to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and listened to the water run. In 28 years of fixing things, I've learned that the problems you can see are never the real problems. The real problems are behind the walls, inside the pipes, underneath the floors. By the time they show themselves, the damage is already done. Something behind the walls of my life had been leaking for a long time, and I was only now hearing the drip. I couldn't sleep. Lorraine breathed softly beside me. Her back turned, the covers pulled to her chin. The bedroom was dark except for the faint glow of the digital clock. 2:14 in the morning. I stared at the ceiling and counted. Not sheep. Keys. 46 keys on the steel ring sitting on my nightstand. I could see their outline in the dark, the familiar shape I'd carried every day for 28 years. Each key a door. Each door a responsibility. Each responsibility a promise that someone trusted me enough to hand me the means to enter the places they cared about. Trust is a strange thing. You don't notice it until it's gone. like the hum of a refrigerator. You only hear the silence when it stops. Dale Prescott and I grew up 4 houses apart on Mulberry Road in Colton, Georgia. His mother worked at the post office. My father worked at the mill. We played on the same Little League team. I was catcher. Dale was pitcher. He had a good arm and a better smile, the kind that made coaches forgive wild throws and teachers overlook late homework. We graduated together in 1987. I stayed in Colton, married Lorraine 2 years later, started at Jefferson Ridge as a custodial assistant. Dale left for college in Macon. We lost touch the way men do when one stays and the other goes. Christmas cards for a few years, then nothing. 30 years passed. Then one evening, 4 years ago, my phone rang. Dale's voice on the other end, older but still carrying that easy warmth that made people want to help him. "Curtis, I need a favor. I'm interviewing for the principal position at Jefferson Ridge. Would you put in a word with the school board?" He told me he'd been working in education for 20 years. Assistant principal in Valdosta, then a district coordinator in Macon. Good career, he said. But he wanted to come home to Colton. Wanted his roots again. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? This was Dale, the boy who'd stood beside me at my father's funeral. The boy who'd helped me carry my mother's furniture when she moved to the assisted living home. I went to the school board meeting and spoke for 3 minutes. Told them Dale Prescott was the most honest person I'd known growing up. Told them he'd make Jefferson Ridge proud. Howard Gaines, the board chairman, asked if I'd stake my reputation on it. I would, I said. And I did. Dale got the job. First week. He came to my workshop in the basement, shook my hand, and said, "Curtis, I owe you one. This school is lucky to have you." 4 years later, my name was on every fraudulent purchase order in his school, and he was standing behind an auditor. Practicing concern, I turned onto my side. Lorraine shifted in her sleep. She smelled faintly of something I couldn't place. Not her usual lavender lotion. Something warmer. Woodsy. I'd noticed it a few times over the past year or so. Always on the evenings she came home from her Thursday church group. Lorraine had changed in small ways over the past 2 years. New blouses she hadn't worn before. A different shade of lipstick. She'd started going to a Thursday evening Bible study at Grace Fellowship, though she'd never mentioned the group before it suddenly appeared on her calendar. She came home late those nights, sometimes past 10, animated and flushed in a way that didn't quite match an evening of discussing scripture. I hadn't thought much about it. People change. Interests shift. A man who spends his days tightening bolts and replacing filters doesn't always notice when the person beside him starts turning in a different direction. But tonight, lying in the dark, I noticed. Morning came gray and cold. January in Georgia isn't bitter like up north, but it has a damp chill that settles into old houses and older bones. I made coffee at 5:30, same as always. Sat at the kitchen table with my thermos and the local paper. Tyler's door stayed closed. My son was 16, a junior, ran track. Kept mostly to himself in the way teenagers do. But lately the silence had gotten heavier. He used to come down for breakfast, eat cereal standing at the counter, ask me about the Falcons or complain about his history teacher. For the past 3 weeks, nothing. Door closed, earbuds in, eyes down when we passed in the hallway. I knocked on his door. "Tyler. Breakfast. I'm good. Dad." His voice muffled through the wood. Flat. distant. I stood there with my hand on the doorframe, listening to nothing. Then I went to work. That evening, after dinner, Lorraine was drying dishes when she asked the question that made me set down my fork. Did the auditor ask about the boiler room orders specifically? I looked at her. She was facing the sink, her back to me, hands working the towel over a plate with careful circles. Why would you ask about the boiler room? I said. She shrugged without turning around. Just wondering. Dale mentioned something about boiler costs being flagged. Dale mentioned it to you. We talk at the office sometimes. Curtis. He's the principal. I work there too. She set the plate in the cabinet and picked up another one. Her movements were measured, deliberate. The way a person moves when they're aware of being watched but pretending not to be. The boiler room orders. I hadn't told Lorraine which purchase orders were in the file. Helen Marsh hadn't published the details. The only people who knew the specifics were Helen, Dale, and me. And now, apparently, Lorraine. Dale mentioned it. Maybe he had principals talk to their staff, but the boiler room was a detail buried on page 14 of a 40-page file. Not something you'd mention casually over office small talk. I didn't push it. Not yet. Instead, I went out to my workshop behind the house and pulled down the notebook marked with the current year from the shelf. 28 notebooks, one for each year, every repair, every part, every cost, written in pencil on lined paper. I opened to September and ran my finger down the column. Boiler inspection, parts ordered, gaskets and a pressure relief valve. My cost from the supply company, $2,100. I'd written the receipt number beside it. Then I pulled out the copy of the school's purchase order that Helen Marsh had left with me. Same date, same description, boiler inspection, parts and labor. The school had been invoiced $8,400. I set the two numbers side by side under the workshop light. 2,100, 8,400. The difference sat between them like a crack in a foundation wall, small enough to miss, wide enough to bring the whole structure down. I closed the notebook. 27 more years of numbers sat on that shelf. 27 more years of truth, written in pencil, waiting to be compared against whatever fiction someone had been writing in my name. I wasn't ready to open them all yet, but I knew I would have to, because the crack was already there, and cracks don't fix themselves. I started with 6 months, not the full 28 years, just the most recent 6 months, January through June of last year. Because a man who's spent his life fixing things knows you don't tear open a whole wall when you hear a drip. You find the source first, then you trace the line. My workshop behind the house was small, 10 by 12, with a wooden workbench my father built and a single lamp that threw warm light across the surface. Pegboard on the wall held tools arranged by size. Shelf above the bench held the notebooks. I pulled down the current year and the one before it, set them side by side, and opened the school's purchase order file Helen Marsh had left with me. Line by line, entry by entry. My handwriting on the left. The school's invoices on the right. January, hallway lighting replacement. Second floor east wing. My cost, $460 for 12 fluorescent ballasts. School invoice, $2,200. Labor included, but I'd done the labor myself. There was no outside contractor. February, restroom plumbing, first floor boys. My cost, $310 for fittings and a section of copper pipe. School invoice, $1,800. Again, labor charges for work I'd performed with my own hands. March. Gymnasium ceiling tiles. Inspection and assessment. My cost, 0. I'd inspected the tiles myself, submitted a work order requesting $1,800 for replacement of 6 water-damaged panels. Work order denied. Budget constraints. Dale had written in the margin. But the school's file showed an invoice for $4,200 from a contractor called Summit Facility Solutions for gymnasium ceiling assessment and repair. I'd never heard of Summit Facility Solutions. The repair had never been done. I knew because I walked under those ceiling tiles every morning, and 3 of them were still sagging with brown water stains. I kept going. April, May, June. Every month. The same pattern. My actual costs on the left. Small numbers in pencil. The school's invoiced costs on the right. Inflated numbers in printer ink. The difference between them growing wider with each page. By the time I finished 6 months, I'd filled 2 sheets of legal paper with comparisons. Total actual cost, according to my records, $23,400. Total invoiced cost, according to the school's files, $110,600. The difference was $87,200. In 6 months, I set my pencil down and stared at the numbers. $87,000 of phantom repairs, ghost contractors, and labor charges for work that either never happened or was done by me for free. Multiply that by 4 years, and you're in the neighborhood of $420,000. The exact number Helen Marsh had dropped on the table. Someone had built an entire accounting fiction on top of my real work. Every pipe I'd fixed, every light I'd replaced, every tile I'd inspected. Someone had taken that actual repair and inflated it into a purchase order 3 or 4 times its real cost. They'd used my name, my handwriting, my reputation as the foundation for a theft that had been running for years. The door to the workshop opened. Megan stood there, holding Gracie on her hip. My daughter was 26, sharp-eyed, direct. She'd gotten her mother's dark hair and my father's stubbornness. Gracie was 3, bundled in a pink coat, clutching a stuffed rabbit by one ear. Dad. I called twice. Megan said, "You didn't answer. Sorry, honey." I was going through the numbers. She set Gracie down and walked to the workbench. Her eyes moved across the legal pad, the notebooks, the purchase orders. She was quiet for a long moment. How bad, she asked. $87,000 in 6 months. Just what I've checked so far. Megan pulled out her phone. Dad. I teach at Colton Elementary. Our maintenance budget for the whole school is about $42,000 a year. Jefferson Ridge is listed at $160,000. I looked it up last night after you told me what happened. Same square footage, same age building. Their budget is nearly 4 times ours. She showed me the screen. County budget reports. Publicly available. The numbers were right there. Someone's been draining that school for years, she said, and they've been using your name to do it. Gracie tugged at my pant leg. Grandpa. She held up the stuffed rabbit. One ear was torn, cotton peeking through the seam. Fix, she said. I picked her up and set her on the workbench. Found a needle and thread in the drawer. Stitched the ear closed while Gracie watched with the serious focus only a 3-year-old can give to a rabbit surgery. When I finished, she squeezed it and nodded. Grandpa fixes everything, she said. Megan smiled, but her eyes were worried. She kissed Gracie's head, then looked at me. What are you going to do? I'm going to keep counting, I said. That night, after Megan and Gracie left, I drove to the school. I had my keys. I always had my keys. The building was dark except for the exit signs glowing red at the end of each corridor. My footsteps echoed on the tile. I went to the supply closet on the first floor, the main storage room for maintenance materials, filters, fittings, paint, electrical components. According to the school's purchase orders, this room should have held over $15,000 worth of supplies ordered in the past quarter alone. I unlocked the door. My key turned smooth in the lock, same as always. I pulled the chain for the overhead light. The shelves were half empty. 3 cans of paint, a box of air filters, some PVC fittings in a bin, maybe $2,000 of materials, if I was generous. $15,000 on paper, $2,000 on the shelves. I stood there looking at the gap between what should have been and what was. Then I looked at the lock. No scratches, no signs of forced entry. Whoever had been accessing this room had a key. I carry 46 keys, but the supply closet key has only 1 copy. The original, on my ring, and the backup, kept in the key cabinet behind the front office reception desk. The front office where Lorraine worked 3 afternoons a week. I turned off the light and locked the door, walked back through the dark hallway, keys jingling with each step, counting doors I'd never thought to question. I keep a magnifying glass in my workshop. Old one, brass handle, belonged to my father. He used it to read the fine print on equipment manuals when his eyes started failing. I used it that Saturday morning for something he never would have imagined. I laid 3 documents side by side under the desk lamp. On the left, my actual signature from our homeowner's insurance renewal. In the center, my signature from Tyler's school enrollment form. On the right, the signature from one of the fraudulent purchase orders. The first 2 matched perfectly. The capital C with its wide opening, the URT looping together in one fluid motion, the W in Weber starting high and pulling down at the finish, a habit I'd developed from decades of signing forms pressed against my thigh while standing in hallways. The third signature was close, 95% identical. The proportions were right. The slant was right. The spacing between letters was right. Someone had practiced this signature many times, but the final stroke on the W pulled sideways instead of down. A tell so small you'd need a magnifying glass and 30 years of writing the original to catch it. I sat back and thought about what it takes to forge a man's signature at that level. You'd need dozens of samples, not just 1 or 2. You'd need insurance forms, tax documents, school paperwork, bank authorizations, the kind of documents kept in a filing cabinet at home, or in a desk drawer, or stacked in folders that a wife might have access to every single day of a 27-year marriage. Megan called that afternoon. I told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a moment. "Dad," she said, "who has enough samples of your handwriting to practice a forgery that close?" I didn't answer. The silence said it for me. "She has filing cabinets full of your signatures," Megan said. "Insurance, mortgage, taxes, medical forms, decades of them." "I know." "Then why haven't you asked her? Because I'm not sure I'm ready for the answer." I said, "Not yet. I need more before I walk through that door." That evening, I drove Tyler to his track practice at the county sports complex. He sat in the passenger seat with his earbuds in, staring out the window. I turned off the radio and waited. Silence between a father and a teenage son can mean many things. Comfortable silence, angry silence. The silence of someone carrying something too heavy to set down in a moving car. "Tyler," I said, "how's school going?" He pulled out one earbud. Fine. Anything going on I should know about? He looked at me for half a second, then back at the window. People are talking. Dad. About the audit. Mister. Prescott said you should cooperate so it goes away faster. I gripped the steering wheel. People are talking. Cooperate. Those weren't the words of a 16-year-old boy. Those were instructions, delivered in the careful phrasing of someone who'd been told exactly what to say. Who's telling you this? Tyler. He put the earbud back in. Nobody. I just hear things. I pulled into the parking lot and stopped. Tyler grabbed his gym bag, opened the door, and paused with one foot on the asphalt. He didn't turn around. Dad, maybe you should just let it go. For the family. He closed the door and walked toward the field house. I watched him cross the parking lot, shoulders stiff, head down. My son, walking away from me with someone else's words in his mouth, for the family. That phrase wasn't Tyler's. He didn't talk like that. He talked about the Falcons' draft picks and complained about his chemistry teacher. For the family was adult language, strategic language, the language of someone building a narrative. I drove home with my hands tight on the wheel and a cold weight settling in my chest. Lorraine was reading on the couch when I came in. I hung my keys on the hook by the door and sat down across from her. Lorraine, I said, I need to ask you something about the purchase orders. She set her book down. Her face was calm, patient. Did you ever handle any of the maintenance purchase orders at the front office? Something shifted behind her eyes, fast, like a shadow crossing a window. Curtis, she said, her voice tightening. Why are you doing this? Dale told you the auditor will sort it out. You're making yourself sick over nothing. I'm asking a simple question. She stood up. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from something harder. I am so tired of this, she said, her voice rising. 28 years you've given to that school, and this is how you spend your weekends digging through old notebooks like a detective. You're a janitor. Curtis, not a lawyer. Let the people whose job it is handle this. She walked to the kitchen. I heard the faucet turn on, the deliberate sound of someone washing dishes that didn't need washing. In 27 years of marriage, Lorraine had never called me a janitor. Maintenance supervisor was my title. She knew that. She'd always used it when introducing me to people, with a small note of pride that I'd appreciated even when the work itself got no respect from anyone else. Janitor. The word sat in the air like a slap delivered in slow motion. I went to the bedroom to get a sweater from the closet. On the top shelf, behind the winter blankets, I noticed an envelope I hadn't seen before. Cream-colored, official. I pulled it down. County Registrar's Office. The return address was printed in small blue letters. I opened it. Notice of property title transfer. The document inside was one page, dated August 14th of last year. Our home address. The house my parents had left me. The house where Tyler took his first steps and Megan learned to ride a bike in the driveway, was listed as having been transferred to an entity called Magnolia Properties, LLC. My name appeared nowhere on the transfer document. Lorraine's signature was at the bottom, and beside it, a line for power of attorney, signed with a name I couldn't read clearly in the dim closet light. I stood there holding the paper, my father's house slipping through my fingers on a single page, and thought about the word she'd used, janitor, as if the title was all I'd ever been. As if 28 years of keeping that school standing meant nothing. As if the man holding 46 keys wasn't worth the house his father built. Dale called me into his office on Monday morning. Not a summons, not a formal request. Just a tap on my shoulder while I was replacing a fluorescent tube in the second-floor hallway. And a quiet, "Hey, Curtis." Got a minute. I followed him downstairs. His office was on the first floor, corner room, windows facing the parking lot. When I walked in, he closed the door behind me and gestured to the chair across from his desk. He sat on the edge of the desk itself, not behind it. A deliberate choice. Eye level. Casual. The posture of a friend. Not a boss. "Curtis," he said, folding his hands in his lap. "I need you to hear me out. I know you've been going through the files. Helen Marsh called me Friday. She said you've been asking for copies of purchase orders." I looked at him. "I have the right to review my own records." "Of course you do," Dale said. His voice was steady, warm. "I'm not saying otherwise. I'm saying I understand how this looks, and I'm trying to help you. That's what I've always done." "Right. Look out for each other." He leaned forward slightly. The overhead vent pushed air across the room, carrying a scent I'd smelled before. Sandalwood. Warm. Earthy. Distinctive. I'd noticed it weeks ago in this office when I came in to fix the window latch. I'd noticed it on Lorraine's jacket on Thursday nights when she came home from her Bible study. Same scent. Same source. The thought arrived like a splinter working its way under the skin. Not sharp enough to cry out. Just present enough to notice every time you moved. "Curtis," Dale said, "you've given this school 28 years. Nobody knows this building like you do." I told the school board that. I told them Curtis Weber is the most dependable employee Jefferson Ridge has ever had. He paused. Let the words settle. "But," he continued, "if you start digging into financial records that are above your pay grade, people are going to ask why. They're going to wonder if you're trying to cover something up. I don't want that for you. I'm trying to protect you. Buddy. Buddy." The word landed soft, familiar. The same word he'd used in Little League when I'd miss a throw. Same word he'd used at my father's funeral when I couldn't stop my hands from shaking. Same word. Different man. I appreciate that. "Dale," I said, "but I have a question. Ask me anything. Last Thursday, I was doing late rounds alone, checked all the locks, set the thermostats, walked every hallway. You mentioned that to the auditor. How did you know I was alone that night?" Dale's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes recalculated. The way a thermostat clicks when it senses a shift in temperature. "It's on the staffing schedule," he said. "I keep track of building access for security purposes. The staffing schedule shows shift hours," I said. "It doesn't show which nights I walk round solo. That's on the weekly detail sheet. I print it myself and pin it to the bulletin board in the front office." Dale's smile held. Professional. Patient. Maybe I saw it there. He said, "I walk past that board every day." "Maybe you did." I said. I held his gaze for 3 seconds. He didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't do anything that a man with nothing to hide wouldn't do. But I'd spent 28 years reading buildings, and buildings lie the same way people do. The surface looks fine. The crack is behind the drywall. The weekly detail sheet. I pinned a new one every Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, it was buried under flyers and memos. The only person who'd have reason to pull it out and read it carefully was someone who needed to know exactly when I was in the building and exactly when I wasn't. Someone who worked in the front office. Someone who had access to that bulletin board 3 afternoons a week. I stood up. Dale stood too, his hand reaching for my shoulder again. That paternal grip. Curtis, I know this is hard, but trust me. Let me handle the board. Let me handle Helen. You focus on what you do best. Keep the building running. I'll take care of the rest. Take care of the rest. The same thing Lorraine had said. Let the people whose job it is handle this. Both of them. Same message. Stop digging. Stay quiet. Trust us. Thank you. Dale, I said. I'll think about it. I walked to the door and opened it. Stepped into the hallway. Then I stopped. I'd left my voltage tester on the chair. I turned back. Through the narrow glass panel beside the doorframe, I could see Dale at his desk. He'd already picked up his phone. His thumbs moved fast across the screen. His face was different now. Not the warm concern he'd worn for me. Something leaner, sharper. The expression of a man managing a situation, not worrying about a friend. I watched him for 5 seconds through that glass. 5 seconds of the real Dale Prescott, the one who appeared when the door was closed and the audience had left. He hit send. Then he set the phone down, straightened his tie, and reassembled the face I'd known for 30 years. I walked away without my voltage tester. I didn't need it anymore. I'd already found the short circuit. It wasn't in the wiring. It was sitting behind that desk, wearing a tie and a borrowed expression of concern, smelling like sandalwood. The same sandalwood my wife brought home every Thursday night. I waited until 9 that night. The building empties by 7:30, after the last tutoring sessions and janitorial walkthrough. By 9, it's just me and the exit signs. I let myself in through the loading dock entrance on the east side. Didn't turn on the hallway lights. Didn't need to. I've walked these corridors in the dark more times than I can count, checking on water heaters, resetting breakers after storms, fixing the alarm system at 2 in the morning when it triggered on a raccoon. 28 years of muscle memory. My feet know every turn. The records room was on the first floor, behind the front office. A converted storage closet. Really, with a filing cabinet, a small desk, and the school's administrative computer. Lorraine used this room when she processed attendance records and filed purchase orders on her 3 afternoons a week. The door had a keypad lock, 4-digit code. I'd installed the keypad myself 5 years ago when the old deadbolt stuck. I'd set the code and given it to 2 people, myself and Lorraine. I punched in the code and stepped inside, closed the door, turned on the desk lamp, not the overhead, because light under a door is visible from the hallway, and I didn't want questions from a passing security patrol. The computer was old, a county-issued desktop that took 90 seconds to boot. While it loaded, I opened the filing cabinet. Purchase orders, filed by month. I pulled the last 6 months and set them on the desk. These were the originals, the ones with the forged signatures that matched the copies Helen Marsh had shown me. The computer came to life. I opened the administrative email program. Lorraine's account was logged in. She hadn't signed out after her last shift. Either carelessness or the confidence of someone who didn't think anyone would look. I typed Dale's name in the search bar and hit enter. 47 emails between Lorraine Weber and Dale Prescott. Over the past 11 months, I scrolled through them, reading the subject lines first. Most were bland. Staff meeting reminder, supply delivery schedule, attendance report for October. But 7 of them had no subject line at all, just blank headers with attachments. I opened the first one, dated March 8th of last year. The body was 2 sentences, Thursday and Monday schedules attached. He does Thursday solo this week. Monday with Ray. He, not Curtis, not my husband. The attachment was a photograph of my weekly detail sheet, the one I pinned to the bulletin board every Monday. Taken with a phone camera, slightly angled, I could see the pushpin at the top and the edge of a flyer for the spring book fair beneath it. I opened the second blank email, April 12th. Same format. Updated schedule. He's solo both nights this week. Building empty by 8:30. The third email was different. Dated May 19th. No schedule this time. The attachment was a scan. 12 pages. I clicked through them and felt something cold move through my chest. Slow and heavy, like ice water filling a pipe. Our homeowner's insurance policy. My signature on 3 pages. Tyler's birth certificate application. My signature. Our joint tax return from 2 years ago. My signature on every page. A vehicle registration form. My signature. Megan's college financial aid application from 6 years ago. My signature. 12 documents. 12 signatures. Carefully scanned. High resolution. Compiled into a single file. Every sample a forger would need to practice the capital C, the looping URT, the downward pull on the W. The email's text was one line. Here are the rest. Should be enough now. Should be enough now. My wife had gathered 12 of my signatures from our home filing cabinet, scanned them, and emailed them to my best friend so he could practice forging my name on purchase orders that would steal $420,000 from children. I sat in that dark room with the desk lamp throwing shadows on the wall and read through the remaining emails. A log of access times for the records room, pulled from the keypad's digital memory. Lorraine had entered this room 14 times in the past 6 months, always on evenings when I was doing late rounds, always between 8 and 9:30. The window when the building was empty except for me. 2 floors up, checking locks I didn't know she was unlocking behind me. 14 visits. 14 Thursday or Monday nights when I walked the upper hallways believing I was alone. While my wife sat in this room below me, filing purchase orders with my forged signature, adjusting records, making the numbers align. I closed the email. I didn't print anything, didn't forward anything to myself. Not yet. I needed to think about what came next, and thinking required distance from the evidence that my wife of 27 years had been systematically helping someone destroy me. I turned off the desk lamp, sat in the dark for a minute. The building hummed around me, the way buildings do at night. Heating ducts ticking, water heater cycling, the low vibration of electrical panels behind the walls, sounds I'd spent a lifetime listening to, diagnosing, understanding, sounds I trusted. I locked the records room and walked out through the loading dock. The cold air hit my face. January in Georgia, damp and sharp. I drove home. Lorraine's car was in the driveway. The house was dark except for the bedroom window, where the faint blue flicker of her phone screen was visible through the curtain. I sat in the kitchen without turning on a light. Took the keyring from my belt and placed it on the table. 46 keys. £1 4 ounces. 28 years of trust. Set down on a granite countertop with a soft clink that nobody heard. I'd given her the keys to every door in that school. She'd given them to someone else. And now I had to decide what to do with what was left. The truth was in that building, sitting on a hard drive in a dark room, waiting. And my wife was upstairs, sleeping or pretending to sleep. With the phone she used to photograph my schedules and scan my signatures glowing softly against the pillow, I sat there until midnight, listening to the house settle around me. Every creak and groan familiar. Every sound a language I'd spent a lifetime learning to read. But I'd never learned to read the silence of the person sleeping upstairs. And that silence, I was beginning to understand, was the loudest sound in the house. Lorraine came through the kitchen door at 11:14 that Thursday night. I was sitting at the table with a glass of water, pretending to read the paper. I'd been sitting there since 10, listening for her car. She set her purse on the counter and smiled. The smile of a woman who'd rehearsed it in the rearview mirror. "How was church group?" I asked. "Good. We studied Romans 12, the part about living in harmony." She poured herself a glass of water and stood at the sink, her back to me. The kitchen light caught the side of her face. She looked tired, but not the tired of someone who'd spent 2 hours studying scripture. The tired of someone maintaining a performance. The scent reached me before she turned around. Sandalwood. Warm and distinctive, settled into the fabric of her blouse. The same scent that filled Dale Prescott's office, that clung to his desk chair, that I'd breathed in while he told me to trust him. 3 days ago, I'd sat in a dark room reading emails where my wife called me he. 3 days of knowing she'd scanned my signatures and sent them to the man who was destroying my life. 3 days of sleeping next to her without saying a word. I hadn't confronted her. Not because I was afraid, because I was building something. The way you don't patch a leaking wall until you've traced the pipe all the way back to the source. You patch too early. The water finds another route. I needed to see the whole system before I touched any of it. So I sat at that kitchen table and smelled sandalwood and said nothing. Lorraine dried her hands and headed for the stairs. "Good night, honey," she said. "Good night." Her footsteps on the stairs, the bedroom door closing, the faint sound of her phone buzzing once. Then silence. I washed my glass and set it in the rack, turned off the kitchen light, stood in the dark for a moment, then went to the living room and sat in my father's armchair by the window. My father had sat in this chair every evening after his shift at the mill. He'd drink 1 beer, read the Colton Gazette, and fall asleep before the 10 o'clock news. He never locked the front door because he said a man who lives honest doesn't need to lock things. I disagreed with him on that. I locked everything: doors, cabinets, supply closets. I believed in locks. Now I was learning that locks only work when you trust the people who hold the copies. Saturday morning. Tyler was eating cereal at the kitchen counter, earbuds around his neck for once, scrolling through his phone. I poured coffee and leaned against the opposite counter, giving him space. Saturdays used to be our time. We'd listen to the radio in the workshop while I showed him basic repairs, how to sweat a copper joint, how to test an outlet with a multimeter. He'd hand me tools like a surgeon's assistant, serious and focused. That had stopped 3 months ago. Around the same time, everything else had started. "Tyler," I said, "you doing anything today?" He shrugged. "Maybe going to Jake's house. You want to help me in the workshop this afternoon? I need to rebuild a faucet cartridge. He looked up from his phone. For a half second, I saw the boy who used to hand me wrenches and ask what each tool was called. Then something closed behind his eyes, like a shutter dropping. Dad, I don't think that's a good idea right now. Why not? He set his spoon down and looked at the counter. His voice dropped. Quiet, careful. Dale checks on me and Mom sometimes when you work the late shift. He says it's important for the family to have stability while things are being worked out. He says I should focus on school and not get pulled into grown-up problems. I set my coffee down. Dale comes to this house. Sometimes, Tyler's eyes stayed on the counter. He brings dinner, talks to Mom. He said it's just what friends do. How many times Tyler was quiet for 3 seconds? Maybe 6 or 7. Since Thanksgiving. 7 weeks. 7 visits while I was walking dark hallways 2 miles away, checking locks, believing my family was safe at home. Does he stay long? Asked. My voice was steady, the voice of a man tightening a bolt, measuring torque, keeping the wrench from slipping. I don't know. I usually go upstairs when he comes. Mom says it's rude to hang around when adults are talking. Mom says. 2 words that had started to sound like a warning label. Tyler picked up his spoon again. Dad, he said without looking up. Can we not make this weird? He's just being nice. Sure, buddy, I said. Not weird at all. He finished his cereal, put the bowl in the sink, and disappeared upstairs. I heard his door close. The lock clicking. My 16-year-old son had just told me that my best friend visits my wife while I'm at work, brings dinner, talks privately, and sends my son upstairs so the adults can be alone. And my son thought this was normal, because his mother told him it was. I called Megan. She answered on the second ring. I could hear Gracie in the background, singing something about a butterfly. Dad. I was about to call you. Megan said, I spent last night searching the county business registry, Summit Facility Solutions. The contractor on those gymnasium invoices registered in August 3 years ago. Address is a mailbox at the UPS store on Commerce Street. I took a breath. Keep going. There are 2 more companies in the school's vendor list that I don't recognize. Pinnacle Building Services and Crescent Maintenance Group, both registered at the same UPS store address. Same month, 3 shell companies, all created within weeks of each other, all receiving payments from Jefferson Ridge's maintenance budget. 3 companies, all fake, all funneling money from the school into accounts that someone controlled. And all created the same year Dale Prescott became principal. How much total? I asked. Megan paused. I'm still adding. But from what I can see in the public budget filings, those 3 vendors have been paid over $380,000 in the past 4 years. $380,000. Close enough to $420 to account for inflated labor charges and individual purchase orders on top. Dad, she said, this isn't just one person skimming. This is a system. Someone built this from the ground up. I know, I said, and I'm starting to see who built it. Ruthie Simmons lived in a white clapboard house on Pecan Street, 2 blocks from the railroad tracks. She'd worked as the school secretary at Jefferson Ridge for 22 years before retiring 6 years ago. The year before Dale arrived. When I called her and said I needed to talk about the school's financial records, she said, "Come over Sunday. I'll put on coffee. Bring your notebooks." Her kitchen smelled like Earl Grey tea and furniture polish. She sat across from me at a table covered with a lace cloth, her white hair pinned neatly, her back straight as a post. On the table between us sat a metal lockbox, the kind you'd find in a hardware store, except this one had a combination lock and was heavy enough to anchor a small boat. "I keep copies of everything," she said, unlatching the lid. 22 years of school records, budget reports, vendor lists, purchase orders, correspondence with the county office. She looked up at me with eyes that missed nothing. When they told me to hand over my files during the transition, I gave them the originals, but I kept the copies. Call it habit. Call it instinct. Call it not trusting a man who smiles too much and listens too little. She pulled out a stack of folders, each labeled by year in neat handwriting that reminded me of my own. "Before Dale," she said, opening a folder marked with the year 7 years ago. The maintenance budget for Jefferson Ridge was $43,000 annually. That covered everything: parts, labor, seasonal contracts, emergency repairs. You and I managed it together. Curtis. We never went over budget once in my 22 years. I nodded. I remembered. Ruthie and I had worked side by side for most of my time at the school. She handled the paperwork. I handled the repairs. Between us, we'd kept that building running on a shoestring and never missed a payment. She slid a printed spreadsheet across the table. "Now look at this. First full year after Dale became principal, maintenance budget, $112,000. Year 2, 138. Year 3, 157. This year, 161. I stared at the numbers. A 4-fold increase in 4 years. Ruthie tapped the page with one finger. "And has the building gotten better?" she asked. "Are the hallways cleaner? Are the windows newer? Is the roof tighter?" "No," I said. "The building's in worse shape than when you left." She nodded as if she'd expected that answer. She pulled out another folder. Vendor list. "I went through the current list your daughter sent me." She paused. "Smart girl, you're Megan." I recognized every contractor on the list from my years at the school. Benson Plumbing, real. Harper Electric, real. Colton Glass, real. But 3 of them I've never heard of. Summit Facility Solutions. I said. Pinnacle Building Services. Crescent Maintenance Group. Ruthie nodded. Never heard of any of them. And I knew every contractor within 50 miles of Colton. If they were real companies, I would have heard of them. They aren't real. She closed the vendor folder and opened another one. There was something else, she said. Her voice changed. Quieter, more careful. March of last year. I still talk to Eleanor McKee. She's the school nurse. She called me one evening, upset. Said a ceiling tile in the gymnasium fell during a basketball practice and hit a student. Boy named Marcus Bell, 14 years old. Cut on his forehead. Possible concussion. Eleanor wrote it up in her incident log as a facility failure. Ceiling tile dislodged due to water damage. I felt the air in the room go still. But when the official report was filed with the county, Ruthie continued, it said student horseplay, no facility deficiency noted. Eleanor told me she was surprised because that's not what she'd documented. She asked Dale about it, and he told her the county had reviewed it and reclassified the incident. She didn't push it. I thought about the 3 work orders I'd submitted for the gymnasium ceiling. January of the year before last. April, and the following January. 3 requests. 3 denials. Budget constraints. Dale had written each time, but the budget wasn't constrained. The budget had quadrupled. The money was there. It just wasn't going to ceiling tiles. It was going to Summit Facility Solutions and Pinnacle Building Services and Crescent Maintenance Group, 3 companies that existed only as mailboxes at a UPS store on Commerce Street. A child got hurt, I said quietly. Ruthie folded her hands on the table. A child got hurt because the money meant to fix that ceiling was somewhere else, she said. And the man responsible changed the report so no one would ask where it went. I sat with that for a moment. The weight of it pressed against my chest, like a hand laid flat. Ruthie reached into the lockbox one more time and pulled out a single sheet of paper. One more thing, she said. When Dale was hired, the school board was told he'd left his previous position in Valdosta due to district restructuring, budget cuts, staff reductions, the usual story. She set the paper on the table. It was a printout of a local news article from the Valdosta Daily Times, dated 5 years ago. The headline read, "School Administrator Departs Amid Financial Review." My sister taught at that school. Ruthie said, "She told me Dale didn't leave because of restructuring. He left because the books didn't balance. They found discrepancies in the maintenance budget. Same pattern, inflated invoices, phantom vendors. They couldn't prove criminal intent, so they let him resign quietly. No charges, no public statement, just a handshake and a sealed personnel file." I looked at the article. Same pattern, different school, different town, same man. He's done this before. I said. Ruthie closed the lockbox with a click, and he'll do it again somewhere else if nobody stops him here. She looked at me for a long moment, then said something I wasn't expecting. "Curtis, I've lived in this town for 40 years. I see things. Everyone sees things." She paused, choosing her words. Everyone in Colton sees what's happening, except the one person who should see it most. I waited. She shook her head slowly. "I've said enough. You're a smart man. You'll see it when you're ready." I drove home with the lockbox contents photocopied and tucked under the passenger seat. Ruthie's last words sat in my mind like a splinter I couldn't reach. Everyone sees it except you. She wasn't talking about the money. I made a list. Not on paper, in my head, while I lay in bed Sunday night. Lorraine breathing beside me. 2 years of changes, small enough to dismiss one at a time. But when you laid them end to end, they formed a line as clear as a chalk mark on a floor. The Thursday Bible study that started 2 years ago. She'd never attended a weeknight group before, never mentioned Grace Fellowship until it suddenly appeared on her calendar. The new clothes, not expensive, but different. Blouses with lower necklines. A perfume I didn't recognize that she kept in her purse instead of on the dresser. The phone. She'd always left it on the kitchen counter, face up, unlocked. Sometime in the past year, she'd started carrying it in her pocket. Screen always dimmed. Notifications silenced. The late nights. Church group ended at 9, she said. But she rarely came home before 10:30, sometimes 11, always with an explanation that felt polished, rehearsed. Traffic on Route 12, stopped for gas, talked to Margaret in the parking lot, and the sandalwood, always the sandalwood, on her jacket, in her hair, on the collar of her blouse, a scent that didn't belong to any perfume she owned, because it wasn't hers. It was his, Monday afternoon, while Lorraine was at the school for her shift. I went through her car, a gray Honda Civic she'd driven for 6 years. I'd changed the oil on that car every 3,000 miles, rotated the tires twice a year, knew every rattle and squeak. But I'd never opened the center console. Inside the console, beneath a stack of napkins and a tire pressure gauge, I found 3 receipts. The first was from a restaurant called The Vine, a small Italian place on the county road between Colton and Macon. 2 entrees, 1 bottle of wine, dated a Thursday evening 6 weeks ago. The second receipt was from the same restaurant. Different Thursday, same order, 2 entrees, wine, dessert. The third receipt made my hands go still. Comfort Inn, Highway 17. 1 room, 1 night. Dated December 5th, a Thursday. Checked in at 9:22 in the evening. Checked out at 6:14 the next morning. December 5th, I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar. December 5th was a Thursday. I'd worked the late shift that night, checked all the locks, walked every hallway, set every thermostat, got home at 11:15. Lorraine was already in bed, face turned to the wall. I'd thought she was asleep. She wasn't asleep. She'd been at a hotel 30 minutes away with the man whose cologne I could smell on her pillow. I put the receipts back exactly where I'd found them, beneath the napkins, beside the tire pressure gauge, closed the console, locked the car. That evening I called Megan. She'd been running searches on Magnolia Properties LLC since I'd shown her the envelope from the county registrar. It's registered to a single member, Megan said. Initial D, last name Prescott. Filed 3 years ago with the Georgia Secretary of State. No employees, no business activity, no tax filings. It's a shell. Dad. Same as the other 3. D. Prescott. Dale Prescott. The entity that now owned my father's house was a hollow company created by my best friend, and my wife had signed the transfer. I went back to the bedroom closet and pulled out the property transfer document I'd found in Task 4. Read it again under the lamp. Slowly this time, word by word. The power of attorney line. I'd been unable to read the signature in the dim closet light before. Now, under the lamp, the name was clear. Curtis M. Weber. My name. My signature. Forged. The same sideways pull on the W. Someone had used my own forged signature to authorize the transfer of my father's house to Dale Prescott's shell company. And the only person whose real signature appeared on the document was Lorraine. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the paper. The house where I grew up. The house where my father taught me to change a light switch at age 10. The house where Tyler took his first steps on the hardwood floor that I'd sanded and refinished myself the summer before he was born. Transferred to Magnolia Properties LLC on August 14th. The 2 days I was in Atlanta for the county maintenance seminar. 2 days away, just enough time. I folded the document and placed it in the envelope marked Evidence on the shelf beside my 28 notebooks. Then I walked downstairs. Lorraine's phone was on the kitchen counter, charging. She was in the shower. The water running, the bathroom door closed, the screen lit up. 1 notification. From D, Thursday still works. Same place. He won't know. He won't know. 3 words about me. Written by the man who'd taken my house, my money, my wife, and was working on taking my son. He won't know. Except I did know. I knew about the emails, the signatures, the 14 visits to the records room, the 3 shell companies, the Comfort Inn, the restaurant receipts, the property transfer, the forged power of attorney, the sandalwood, the Thursday nights, The 7 dinners at my kitchen table while I walked empty hallways alone. I knew everything, and they didn't know I knew. The shower turned off. I heard Lorraine step out, the soft sound of a towel, her footsteps in the hallway above. I set the phone back exactly where it had been. Same angle, same position on the charging cable. Then I went to the workshop, closed the door, and sat in the dark, surrounded by 28 years of notebooks and a lifetime of tools I'd used to fix every broken thing except the one that mattered most. Thursday was 3 days away. Thursday came the way a crack spreads through concrete, slowly, then all at once. Lorraine spent the afternoon getting ready. I watched from the workshop window as she went upstairs at 4:30, came down at 5:45, different blouse, the cream one with the buttons, hair down instead of her usual ponytail, lipstick I didn't recognize, a shade darker than what she kept in the bathroom drawer. She found me in the kitchen. Church group tonight, she said. Might be a little late. Margaret wants to go over the spring service schedule after. I nodded. Have a good time? She kissed my cheek. The sandalwood was already there, applied before she walked out the door. Not after arriving somewhere. Before. Because she wasn't putting it on for God. Her car backed out of the driveway at 6:02. I waited 20 minutes. Then I took my keys off the hook, got in my truck, and followed. I kept 3 cars between us. She took the county road south, past the high school, past the turnoff for Grace Fellowship. She didn't slow down at the church, didn't signal, didn't even glance at the parking lot where her Bible study was supposedly waiting. She kept driving. 12 more minutes. Highway 17. The stretch between Colton and Macon lined with chain motels and gas stations. She pulled into the Comfort Inn parking lot at 6:28 and parked near the side entrance, away from the road. I pulled into the gas station across the highway, cut the engine from the elevated lot. I had a clear view of the motel's side parking area. Lorraine got out, checked her phone, and walked to the side entrance. She didn't look around, didn't hesitate. She walked like a woman who'd done this many times before, who knew exactly which door to use and which hallway to take. I sat there and waited, my hands on the steering wheel, my heart beating in a rhythm I didn't recognize, too slow for what I was feeling, as if my body had decided to conserve energy for whatever came next. 14 minutes later, a gray sedan pulled into the lot. I knew the car. I'd seen it in the Jefferson Ridge parking lot every morning for 4 years, in the reserved spot marked Principal. Dale Prescott stepped out, navy blue jacket, gray slacks. He straightened his collar, picked up a small paper bag from the passenger seat, and walked toward the same side entrance. His stride was easy, unhurried, the walk of a man going somewhere he'd been many times. He disappeared through the door. I sat in my truck for 45 minutes. I didn't follow them inside, didn't take photographs, didn't call anyone. I just sat there with the engine off and the windows up, looking at 2 cars parked side by side in a motel lot on a Thursday evening, and let the math run. 27 years of marriage. 9,855 days, give or take. 9,855 mornings of waking up next to someone I'd chosen. Coffees made, dinners shared, arguments weathered, Tyler's birth, 12 hours of labor, my hand in hers the entire time, Megan's graduation, Lorraine crying in the front row while I recorded the ceremony on a camcorder that kept running out of battery. I thought about the driveway I'd repaved 3 summers ago because Lorraine said the cracks were unsightly. The kitchen sink I'd replaced when she wanted a farmhouse-style basin. The bedroom ceiling I'd repainted when she'd noticed a water stain the size of a quarter. 27 years of fixing things she asked me to fix. And the whole time, something else was breaking that she never mentioned and never intended for me to find. The motel sign buzzed overhead. Comfort Inn. The word comfort glowing yellow against the dark sky. I thought about what comfort meant. A motel room. A man who wasn't her husband. Thursday evenings while I walked empty hallways, counting locks, checking thermostats, believing I was doing something that mattered. At 7:13, I started the truck and drove home. The house was dark. Tyler was at a friend's place for the evening. I turned on the kitchen light and stood in the doorway, looking at the room where I'd eaten 9,000 breakfasts and never once questioned who was sitting across from me. I walked through the house slowly, the way I walked through the school at night, checking things. The living room where we'd watched Tyler's first steps. The hallway where Megan had measured her height on the doorframe every birthday. Pencil marks still visible under 2 coats of paint. The bedroom where Lorraine's pillow still held the indent of her head from this morning. My father built this house in 1971, cleared the lot himself, poured the foundation with 2 friends from the mill, framed the walls over a summer. He'd said a man's house is the one thing nobody can take from you if you build it honest, but someone had taken it. Magnolia Properties, LLC. A company that existed only on paper, registered to the man who was right now in a motel room with my wife. My father's house, built with millworkers' hands and honest sweat, now belonged to a filing in the Georgia Secretary of State's office. I went to the bedroom and lay down on my side of the bed. Lorraine's side was empty. The sheets cool and smooth. The house was quiet. Too quiet. And in the silence, I heard something I'd never noticed before. A faint, rhythmic clicking inside the far wall. Soft and persistent, like a clock counting down. Termites. I recognized the sound from 28 years of building maintenance. The sound of something being eaten from the inside, slowly, invisibly, one small bite at a time, until the structure can no longer hold its own weight. Even the house was falling apart. And I hadn't heard it until now because I'd been too busy listening for things that were already gone. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 5:15 on Monday morning and looked at the man staring back. Gray at the temples, lines around the eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Calloused hands gripping the edge of the sink. He looked like my father. Same tired eyes, same set jaw, same blue polo tucked into khaki work pants. My father had worn that expression every morning for 31 years at the mill. The face of a man who goes to work not because he wants to, but because the alternative is something he can't live with. I clipped the key ring to my belt. 1 pound 4 ounces, 46 keys. I drove to Jefferson Ridge in the dark. The school felt different now. Same hallways. Same floors I'd polished 10,000 times. Same trophy cases and bulletin boards. But the people were different. Or maybe they'd always been this way, and I'd been too busy fixing pipes to notice. Mrs. Garland, the English teacher, walked past me in the second-floor hallway without making eye contact. She'd always said good morning. Always. For 12 years. Today she looked at the floor and kept walking. 2 custodial staff members stopped talking when I entered the break room. The silence lasted 3 seconds before one of them said something about the weather and the other laughed too loudly. In the cafeteria, The food service coordinator moved her purse off the table when I sat down for my 15-minute break. A small gesture, maybe unconscious. But I'd been sitting at that table for 28 years, and nobody had ever moved anything away from me. Guilty until proven innocent. That's how it works in a small town. The audit was public knowledge now. $420,000 missing, and Curtis Weber's name on every document. It didn't matter that I hadn't been charged. Didn't matter that no formal accusation had been filed. The whispers were enough. Dale found me in the boiler room at noon. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, leaning against the frame like a man visiting a friend in his workshop. "Hang in there, buddy," he said. "The board meeting is next month. We'll get through this together." Together. He said it with a straight face. The man who was sleeping with my wife, stealing my house, framing me for embezzlement, and coaching my son to fear me. Together, I looked at him. 18 inches of distance between us. I could smell the sandalwood from where I stood, the same scent that was on Lorraine's pillow every Thursday night, the same scent that clung to the chair in his office where she sat while she planned my destruction. "Thanks, Dale," I said. He patted my shoulder and walked away. His footsteps echoed in the hallway. Confident. Easy. The stride of a man who believed he'd already won. That afternoon, I sat in my workshop at the school, the small room in the basement where I kept my tools and supplies. I pulled a piece of paper from the printer and wrote 2 sentences. I, Curtis Weber, resigned from my position as maintenance supervisor at Jefferson Ridge High School, effective immediately. 28 years of service, ending today. I set the pen down and looked at the paper. 2 sentences. 28 years reduced to 31 words. All I had to do was sign it, walk it upstairs, and hand it to the office. Walk away from the whispers, the accusations, the man who smelled like my wife. Walk away and let them have everything. My eyes drifted to the pegboard on the wall. Every tool hanging in its place. Wrenches arranged by size. Screwdrivers organized by head type. The pipe cutter my father gave me when I started this job. Still sharp after 28 years. Every object in this room placed with care. Maintained with discipline. Used with purpose. This room was mine. Not legally, not on any deed, but mine in the way that matters. Through 28 years of showing up and doing the work nobody else wanted to do, I stared at the resignation letter. A knock on the door. Megan walked in carrying Gracie, who was squirming and pointing at something in her hand. "Dad." "I came to bring you lunch," Megan said. She saw the paper on the desk. Her face changed. She set Gracie down and picked up the letter. "No," she said. Her voice was firm, the voice of a woman who'd inherited her grandfather's stubbornness and her father's sense of right. "If you leave, he wins. And every child who walks through this building loses the one person who actually takes care of it." "Megan." I started. "No. Dad. Look around this room. Look at these walls. You've held this school together with your bare hands for almost 30 years. The man upstairs stole the money that was supposed to help you do that job. And now he wants you to quit so nobody asks where it went." She set the letter back on the desk. "That's not who you are." Gracie had been exploring the workshop, touching tools she wasn't supposed to touch. She came back to me holding a small red toy truck with a broken front wheel. The axle had snapped. leaving the wheel hanging by a thread of plastic. "Grandpa," she said, holding it up with both hands. "Fix." I looked at my granddaughter, 3 years old, pink coat, serious eyes. She didn't know about audits or shell companies or motel rooms on Highway 17. She just knew that when things broke, her grandfather fixed them. I took the truck, found a small bolt and a washer in my parts drawer, drilled a tiny hole through the axle mount with a pin vise, threaded the bolt through, tightened the washer. 2 minutes. The wheel spun freely again. Gracie took the truck back, spun the wheel with her finger, and smiled. "Grandpa fixes everything," she said. I looked at Megan. She was watching me with wet eyes and a jaw set hard enough to crack walnuts. I picked up the resignation letter, read it one more time. Then I tore it in half, and in half again, and dropped the pieces in the trash can beside the desk. Megan exhaled. "Dad," she said, "there's someone who can help. A deputy sheriff with the county. His name is Darnell Hayes. He graduated from Jefferson Ridge about 15 years ago. He told me he owes you a favor." "Darnell Hayes," I said. The name surfaced from deep storage, the way an old key turns up in a drawer you haven't opened in years. The kid whose locker got jammed every single week for 4 straight years. "That's him," Megan said. "He's a deputy now." I remembered Darnell. Skinny kid. Quiet. Sat in the back of every class. Somebody kept jamming gum into his locker mechanism. Every Monday morning, he'd come find me in the hallway, and I'd take out my picks and clear the lock. Never asked who did it. Just fixed it. Every week for 4 years. I smiled for the first time in days. "The kid with the locker," I said. "I always knew who was doing it. I just figured he needed to learn to handle it himself." Megan shook her head. "He handled it. He's the cop now. They're not." Darnell Hayes was taller than I remembered. Broader, too. The skinny kid who used to stand in the hallway every Monday morning with his backpack sliding off one shoulder was now 6'2", solid build, sitting across from me in a booth at Peggy's Diner on the county road, wearing a Colton County Sheriff's Department uniform with a deputy's badge clipped to his chest. He ordered black coffee. I ordered the same. We sat there for a moment, 2 men separated by 20 years and a laminate table, connected by a locker that got jammed 52 weeks a year. "Mr. Weber," he said. "Megan showed me what you've put together. I have to be honest with you. What you have isn't just enough to investigate. It's enough to prosecute." He opened a folder Megan had prepared. Copies of everything. My maintenance logs side by side with the school's invoices, the email printouts from Lorraine's account, the shell company registrations, Ruthie's historical budget records, the property transfer document, 3 phantom vendors registered at the same UPS store, he said, turning pages. 4 years of inflated invoices matching your forged signatures. Email evidence of your wife providing signature samples and schedule information to the principal. A property transfer executed with a forged power of attorney. He looked up, and this is just what you found on your own. A forensic accountant would find more. I know, I said. Darnell closed the folder and leaned back. I made some calls, he said. Quiet ones. Dale Prescott left his position at Valdosta Middle School 5 years ago. The official reason was district restructuring. The real reason was a financial audit that found $53,000 in questionable maintenance expenditures. Same pattern. Inflated vendor invoices. several of which traced back to a company that didn't exist. Same playbook, I said. Exact same, Darnell said. But they couldn't prove who created the phantom vendor, so they offered Prescott a resignation in lieu of termination. No charges filed, personnel file sealed. He paused. Then he came to Colton. And you vouched for him. I looked at my coffee. The weight of that sentence settled on my shoulders like a beam I couldn't put down. I vouched for him. I said. Darnell was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Mr. Weber, that's not your fault. You vouched for the man you knew 30 years ago. That man doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. He pulled out a notepad. I'm going to open an informal inquiry. That means I'll be pulling public records, interviewing vendors, and requesting the school's financial files through the county comptroller's office. I won't need your evidence officially until we move to a formal investigation. But I want you to keep everything secure. Originals in a safe place. I nodded. One more thing, Darnell said. He looked at me directly. Don't confront him. Don't confront your wife. Not yet. If they know you've talked to law enforcement, documents will disappear. Right now, the advantage is that they think you're a janitor who doesn't know how to read a spreadsheet. He paused. No offense. None taken. I said, they've been underestimating me for 28 years. Might as well let them keep going a little longer. Darnell smiled. Same Mr. Weber. You fixed my locker every week and never said a word about who was breaking it. I figured you'd handle it. I said, I did. He said, took a while, though. We shook hands in the parking lot. His grip was firm, steady, the grip of a man who'd learned that patience and persistence eventually outweigh cruelty. I'd like to think that a locker fixed 52 times without judgment had something to do with that. But that might be giving myself too much credit. The next morning at school, I saw Marcus Bell for the first time since Ruthie had told me his story. He was walking down the first-floor hallway toward the gymnasium, gym bag over his shoulder, basketball shoes tied to the strap. 14 years old, average height, thin build, and on his forehead, just above his left eyebrow, a scar, white, raised, about 3 inches long. The kind of scar that comes from something falling hard and fast. I'd seen Marcus around the school for years. Fixed the water fountain outside his homeroom twice. Replaced the light in the stairwell he used every morning. But I'd never looked closely at his forehead until now. Marcus, I said as he passed. He stopped. Morning, Mr. Weber. I nodded toward the gymnasium. Heading to practice. Yeah, sir. He shifted the gym bag on his shoulder. I looked at the scar. How'd you get that? I asked, keeping my voice casual. The voice of a man making small talk, not a man building a case. Marcus touched his forehead reflexively. The way people touch a scar they've learned to carry but never quite forget. Ceiling tile, he said. Last March during practice, I was shooting free throws and heard a crack above me. Next thing I knew, I was on the floor with blood in my eyes. He said it simply. No drama. The way a 14-year-old describes something that happened and was dealt with and moved on from. Were you running around? I asked. Horseplay, Marcus frowned. No, sir. I was standing at the free throw line. The tile just fell. Coach Morrison saw the whole thing. He's the one who called the nurse. I nodded. Thanks. Marcus. Ceiling's getting fixed. Should be good soon. He smiled. Good. Some of the guys won't stand under that section anymore. He walked on toward the gym. I waited until he was gone. Then I went to my workshop and pulled down the notebook from last year, turned to January. There it was, in my own handwriting. Gymnasium ceiling tiles. 6 panels showing water damage and structural sag. Submitted work order for immediate replacement. Estimated cost, $1,800. I turned forward. March. Dale's note in the margin of my returned work order. Denied. Budget constraints. March 15th. The date Eleanor McKee had recorded in her incident log. Ceiling tile fell on Marcus Bell. 3 inches of scar tissue on a 14-year-old boy's forehead. My work order was dated January 9th. Dale denied it, March 3rd. Marcus was injured March 15th. 12 days. 12 days between Dale saying there was no money to fix a ceiling he knew was dangerous, and a child lying on a gymnasium floor with blood running into his eyes. The money was there. $380,000 flowing through 3 phantom companies. $1,800 would have fixed 6 ceiling tiles and kept a boy safe. I closed the notebook and held it against my chest. This wasn't about my name anymore. It wasn't about Lorraine or Dale or the house or the money. This was about 12 days and a scar on a child's face. The back porch steps. 3 wooden steps leading down to the yard, built by my father the same summer he framed the house. I'd replaced the middle step twice over the years, the wood softening from rain and rot, but the top and bottom steps were still original. 55 years of Georgia weather. And they held. Tyler and I used to sit there on Saturday afternoons. I'd bring the portable radio, tune it to the Braves game, and we'd listen while I showed him how to sharpen a chisel or sand a piece of trim. He'd sit on the top step. I'd sit on the bottom. 3 feet of space between us. But it never felt like distance. That Saturday, I found him sitting on the top step alone. No radio. No phone for once. Just sitting, staring at the backyard fence where I'd hung a tire swing for him when he was 7. The swing was still there. Rope frayed, tire cracked from sun. Neither of us had thought to take it down. I sat on the bottom step. Same positions. 3 feet. But the distance was different now. Tyler, I said, I need to talk to you. He didn't look at me. His hands were clasped between his knees. The way mine get when I'm trying to hold something together that wants to fall apart. I know things have been hard, I said. I know people at school are talking. I know Mr. Prescott has been telling you things about me. Tyler's jaw tightened. Dad, please don't. I need you to hear something from me. Not from Dale. Not from your mother. From me. He stared at the fence. The tire swing twisted slowly in a breeze I couldn't feel. Have you been in the gymnasium lately? I asked. He glanced at me. What? The gymnasium ceiling. Some of the tiles are damaged, water stains. A few are sagging. Do you ever notice? Tyler shrugged. I guess. Mr. Prescott said they fixed it after that kid got hurt. They didn't fix it. I said, I know because I'm the one who would have fixed it. I submitted 3 work orders for those ceiling tiles. Everyone was denied. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that cut deeper than I expected. Dad, I don't know what to believe anymore. 5 words. Each one a door closing, not slammed shut, but pressed gently into the frame. The way you close a door when you don't want the person on the other side to hear the click. I looked at my son, 16 years old, track runner, quiet kid who used to hand me wrenches and ask what each tool was for. Somewhere in the past 3 months, Someone had taken the boy who trusted me and replaced him with a boy who couldn't look me in the eye. "Tyler," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. "In your whole life, have I ever lied to you?" He opened his mouth, closed it. His eyes were red at the edges, the way they got when he was fighting something he didn't want to show. The back door opened behind us. "Tyler, come inside. Your father needs some space to sort things out." Lorraine's voice, warm, concerned, the voice of a mother protecting her child. But I heard the other frequencies underneath, the control, the redirect, the subtle pulling of a thread she'd been weaving for months. Tyler stood up without looking at me. He climbed the steps, past his mother in the doorway, and disappeared into the house. Lorraine gave me a small, sympathetic smile, the kind you'd give a neighbor whose dog had just died, and closed the door. I heard the lock turn, a sound I'd heard 10,000 times in schools and buildings and storage rooms, but never from inside my own house. Never from a door between me and my son. I sat on the bottom step and looked at my hands. Calloused palms. A thin scar across the right index finger from a screwdriver that slipped 15 years ago. Grease under the thumbnails that never quite washed out, no matter how hard I scrubbed. These hands had repaired 10,000 broken things in that school. Replaced ceiling tiles, rewired classrooms, rebuilt boilers. These hands had taught Tyler to hold a hammer at age 8, to measure a board at age 10, to use a level at age 12. These hands could fix anything in a building. But they couldn't reach a boy sitting 3 feet away on a porch step. I sat there until the sun dropped behind the pine trees at the back of the yard. The tire swing stopped moving. The yard went still. Inside the house, I could hear the television. Lorraine's voice, faint, saying something to Tyler I couldn't make out. I thought about what Darnell had said. Don't confront. Not yet. The advantage is that they think you can't read a spreadsheet. Let them keep underestimating you. But sitting on those steps, I wasn't thinking about strategy. I was thinking about my son walking through that door without turning around. Walking away from me the way you walk away from something you've been told is broken beyond repair. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Darnell's name on the screen. I answered, "Mr. Weber," he said. I pulled the county's official accident report for the gymnasium incident last March. It lists the cause as student horseplay, no facility deficiency. But I also got Eleanor McKee's original nurse's log through a records request. Her entry says ceiling tile dislodged due to water damage. Student was stationary at time of impact. 2 reports. I said, 2 different stories. 2 different stories, Darnell said, and only one of them matches what Marcus Bell told you. Someone altered the official record, and there's only one person at Jefferson Ridge with the authority to submit incident reports to the county. Dale, I said. Dale, Darnell confirmed. I'm adding falsification of a safety report to the inquiry. This changes things. Mr. Weber, this isn't just fraud anymore. A child was injured in a building under his supervision, and he covered it up. I sat on the porch step in the dark, phone pressed to my ear, and stared at the door my son had closed. 2 kinds of damage. The kind you can see, like a scar on a boy's forehead, and the kind you can't, like whatever had been done to my son behind a door I wasn't allowed to open. Both caused by the same man. I stood in the gymnasium at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning, before the first bus arrived, before the hallways filled with voices and sneakers and locker doors. The room was empty. the overhead lights humming their low, fluorescent hum. I looked up. The ceiling stretched 40 feet across, a grid of acoustic tiles set into aluminum frames. Most of the tiles were original, installed when the building was renovated in 2004. White when they were new. Now they were the color of old teeth, stained by 2 decades of humidity and a roof that had been patched but never properly sealed. 6 tiles in the northeast section showed visible water damage. Brown rings spreading outward from the center. The plaster softened, the edges curling. 3 of them sagged a full inch below the grid. I could see it from the floor. Anyone could see it from the floor. I'd submitted 3 work orders for these tiles. I had the dates memorized now the way you memorize a phone number or a birthday, or the day something changed and couldn't be changed back. January 9th, first work order. 6 panels showing water damage and structural sag. Immediate replacement recommended. Estimated cost, $1,800. April 14th, second work order. Condition worsening. 2 panels now sagging beyond acceptable tolerance. Resubmitted with photographs attached. The following January, a third request, urgent. 3 panels at risk of dislodgement. All 3 denied. All 3 returned with the same note in the margin, in Dale Prescott's handwriting, budget constraints, and on March 15th, between the second and third requests, a ceiling tile fell on a 14-year-old boy named Marcus Bell while he stood at the free throw line during basketball practice. I'd stood in this gymnasium 10,000 times, swept this floor, painted the lines, replaced the backboard bolts, checked the bleacher hinges every September. This room was as familiar to me as my own kitchen. But standing here now, looking up at those sagging tiles, I saw something I hadn't let myself see before. The full picture. Not just one boy and one scar and one falsified report. The full scope of what Dale's theft had done to this building and every child inside it. I walked through the school that morning with different eyes. The first floor boys' restroom. A pipe fitting I'd flagged 4 months ago, leaking slowly behind the wall. Work order submitted, denied. The wall was developing a dark stain at the baseboard. Another month and it would be mold. The east stairwell. Fire door that wouldn't close properly. I'd reported it in October. The spring mechanism needed replacement. $40 part. 15 minutes of labor. Work order denied. That door was a code violation. In a fire, it wouldn't seal. The heating system in the West Wing classrooms. I'd submitted a report in November that the boiler was running above recommended pressure, needed a pressure relief valve replacement, $300, denied. If that valve failed in January, the boiler room would hit dangerous temperatures. Every denied work order was a decision, Dale's decision. Not to spend $1,800 on ceiling tiles. Not to spend $40 on a fire door spring. Not to spend $300 on a pressure relief valve. Not because the money wasn't there. Because the money was going somewhere else. $380,000 over 4 years, flowing through Summit Facility Solutions and Pinnacle Building Services and Crescent Maintenance Group into accounts controlled by a man who'd looked me in the eye and said, "I'm trying to protect you, buddy." That afternoon, I drove to Patricia Bell's house, a small ranch on the south side of Colton, aluminum siding, chain-link fence, a bicycle in the front yard, a welcome mat that said, "Bless this mess." Patricia opened the door in scrubs. She worked 2 jobs, Ruthie had told me. Nursing assistant at the county clinic during the day. Cashier at the Dollar General 3 evenings a week. She was raising Marcus alone. "Mr. Weber," she said, surprised. Is everything okay at the school? Can I come in for a minute? She led me to a small kitchen table. I sat across from her and told her the truth. About the ceiling tiles, about the work orders I'd submitted and Dale had denied, about the money that should have paid for those repairs going to companies that didn't exist, about the nurse's report that said facility failure and the official report that said student horseplay. Patricia listened without interrupting. Her hands were flat on the table, palms down, pressing hard enough that her fingertips went white. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "They told me he was running around, that it was his own fault. I believed them because I didn't have time to question the principal. I work 60 hours a week. Mr. Weber, when the school tells me my son got hurt because he was being careless, I don't have the energy to argue." Her voice cracked on the last word. She pressed her hands harder against the table. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," I said. She looked at me. "You're telling me now? That's more than anyone else has done." I drove back to the school, parked in the lot, and sat for a minute, looking at the building. 1,200 students walked through those doors every morning. 1,200 children whose parents trusted that the building was safe, trusted that the money allocated for their safety was being spent on their safety. I took out my phone and made 3 calls. "Megan, set up a meeting with Howard Gaines and the school board. I want them to see 28 years of the truth. Darnell, bring everything. Both accident reports, the vendor records, the Valdosta file. Ruthie, I need your records too. All of them." I hung up and looked at the key ring on my belt. 46 keys. Every door in this building. I'd carried them for 28 years, and in all that time, I'd never once used them to open a door for myself. Every key, every turn, every lock had been for someone else. For the students, for the teachers, for the building. Time to open the last door. The school board conference room was on the 2nd floor of the county administration building. A room I'd never set foot in during 28 years of working for the people who met there. Long table, oak veneer, 8 chairs, a framed photograph of the state governor on the wall, next to a Georgia flag on a brass stand. Howard Gaines sat at the head of the table. 5 board members lined the sides. 3 I recognized from school events over the years. 2 I'd never seen before. Dale Prescott sat at the far end, closest to the door. Gray suit, blue tie. His posture was loose, relaxed, the posture of a man attending a formality. He even smiled when I walked in. The same warm smile he'd been wearing since he came back to Colton. The smile I'd vouched for. I carried a cardboard box. Megan walked behind me with a folder. Darnell stood near the door in his uniform, holding a manila envelope. Ruthie sat in the visitor's row, her metal lockbox on her lap. I set the box on the table. The sound it made when it landed, heavy and solid, echoed in the quiet room. Howard Gaines looked at the box, then at me. "Mr. Weber," he said. "The floor is yours." I opened the box and lifted out the first notebook, the one from 28 years ago, my first year. Then I placed the second beside it, and the third, and the fourth, one by one. I lined them up across the table, 28 notebooks, 28 years of entries written in pencil on lined paper. Every repair, every part, every cost. The handwriting getting steadier over the years as the young custodial assistant became the man who knew every inch of the building. When the last notebook was in place, I opened 3 of them to specific pages and turned them to face the board. These are my maintenance logs, I said. Every repair I've performed, every part I've ordered, every cost I've recorded for 28 years. The numbers on the left are what I actually spent. The numbers on the right are what the school was invoiced. I pointed to the pages. Boiler repair. My cost, $2,100. School invoice, $8,400. Hallway lighting. My cost, $460. School invoice, $2,200. Gymnasium ceiling assessment. My cost $0 because I did the inspection myself. School invoice, $4,200. Billed to a company called Summit Facility Solutions. I looked at the board members. Summit Facility Solutions does not exist. Megan stepped forward and laid her folder open. She showed the county business registry printouts. 3 companies: Summit Facility Solutions, Pinnacle Building Services, Crescent Maintenance Group, all registered the same month, 3 years ago, all at the same UPS store mailbox on Commerce Street, all receiving payments from Jefferson Ridge's maintenance budget. Total payments to these 3 entities over 4 years. Megan said, $380,000. Ruthie opened her lockbox and pulled out the historical records. Before Mr. Prescott became principal, she said the maintenance budget was $43,000 per year. After his arrival, it increased to over $160,000. Despite the increased spending, the building's condition has deteriorated. She set her documents beside my notebooks. The comparison was clear enough for anyone who could read a spreadsheet. Darnell opened his envelope. He placed 2 documents on the table. These are 2 versions of the incident report for an injury that occurred in the gymnasium last March, he said. A ceiling tile fell on a 14-year-old student. The school nurse documented the cause as ceiling tile dislodged due to water damage. Student stationary at time of impact. The report filed with the county by Principal Prescott lists the cause as student horseplay. No facility deficiency. He turned both documents to face the board. 2 reports, 2 stories, one written by the woman who treated the child's wound. One written by the man who denied 3 work orders to fix the ceiling. Dale's smile was gone. He leaned forward in his chair, his hands flat on the table. The confident posture had been replaced by something tighter, coiled. "This is absurd," he said. "Curtis is a disgruntled employee who's been under investigation for financial misconduct. This is a personal vendetta." Howard Gaines raised one hand. "Mr. Prescott, the numbers speak for themselves. Please sit down." Dale's mouth opened, then closed. He sat back. His jaw worked silently. I opened the last notebook, the one from the previous year. I turned to the page I'd marked with a thin strip of masking tape. "January 9th, I said. "I submitted a work order for 6 damaged ceiling tiles in the gymnasium. Estimated cost, $1,800. Denied on March 3rd. On March 15th, one of those tiles fell on Marcus Bell. He was standing still. He has a 3-inch scar on his forehead." The room was quiet. Not the quiet of people thinking. The quiet of people understanding. I closed the notebook. The man responsible for funding the safety of this building diverted that money to shell companies. I said, "When a child was injured as a direct result, he falsified the incident report to conceal the connection between the stolen funds and the unsafe conditions. My name was forged on the purchase orders to make me the fall guy. I didn't steal $420,000. I spent 28 years trying to keep this school safe on whatever budget I was given. These notebooks are the proof." Howard Gaines stood. "Mr. Prescott," he said, You are suspended from your position effective immediately. Pending a formal investigation, Officer Hayes, please escort Mr. Prescott from the building. Darnell moved to the door and opened it. Dale stood slowly. He buttoned his jacket with hands that weren't quite steady. He looked at each board member. Then he looked at me. It wasn't the look of a friend. It wasn't the look of a man caught in a mistake. It was the look of someone who had calculated every move for 4 years and hadn't planned for the possibility that a maintenance supervisor with a box of pencil-written notebooks could take it all apart. He walked out without a word. Darnell followed him. The door closed. Howard Gaines looked at the 28 notebooks lined up across the table. He looked at me. "Mr. Weber," he said. "Thank you. We owe you an apology, and this school owes you a great deal more than that." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, next to 28 years of work laid out on a table, and waited for the silence to tell me what came next. Lorraine was standing in the kitchen doorway when I got home. Not the composed Lorraine who stirred soup and asked about my day. Not the careful Lorraine who turned phones face down and rehearsed smiles in rearview mirrors. This Lorraine had been crying. Her face was bare, no makeup, no lipstick, no performance. Her eyes were swollen and red. She held a crumpled tissue in one hand and gripped the doorframe with the other, as if the house might shift beneath her if she let go. "I know," she said. "Ruthie called me." I set my keys on the counter. The familiar clink of 46 keys on granite. I pulled out a chair and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd eaten 9,000 dinners without knowing who I was eating with. Lorraine sat across from me. The distance between us was 3 feet. The same distance as the porch steps where Tyler had sat before she called him inside. 3 feet that might as well have been a canyon. She started talking, not all at once, in pieces, the way a wall comes apart when you remove the wrong brick. "It started 3 years ago," she said. Her voice was thin, stretched. "Dale came to the school as principal, and he was kind to me. He noticed me. He asked about my day, my interests, things you hadn't asked about in years." She paused. "You came home every night and talked about the school, the boiler, the plumbing, the ceiling tiles. I felt like I was living with a man who was married to a building." I didn't interrupt her. I sat and listened the way I listen to a pipe telling me where the leak is. "He made me feel like I mattered," she said. "Not as your wife, as me. And I know that sounds like an excuse, and maybe it is. But that's how it started. Coffee in his office, then dinners, then the hotel." She pressed the tissue against her eyes. "The signatures. He asked me to scan some documents, said it was for a grant application, that your handwriting needed to be on file. I didn't question it at first. Then he asked for more, and by then I was already in too deep. The schedule, the key copies, the purchase orders." She looked at her hands. "He told me we'd leave together. Start over somewhere else. He said he'd take care of everything. Take care of everything." The same phrase Dale had used in his office. The same phrase she'd used when she told me to let the professionals handle it. Their shared language, spoken across my dinner table while I washed dishes in the next room. "What about the house?" I asked. She flinched. "He said it was temporary, that we'd sell it together once the divorce was finalized. He said you'd never notice. I'd never noticed that my father's house wasn't mine anymore." She'd signed the papers while I was in Atlanta for a 2-day seminar, learning about updated fire codes for school buildings. "Lorraine," I said. My voice was quiet, not angry, past angry. somewhere on the other side, in a place where the only thing left is clarity. A ceiling tile fell on a 14-year-old boy because Dale took the money that should have fixed it. The money you helped him steal. He changed the report so no one would know. A child bled on the gymnasium floor because of a decision you were part of. She made a sound I'd never heard from her before. Not a sob. Something deeper. Something that came from a place where excuses can't reach. I told myself it wasn't hurting anyone. She whispered. The kitchen was silent. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. Then a voice from the hallway. Mom. Tyler stood in the doorway. His face told me he'd been there long enough. His eyes were red and wide, his hands balled into fists at his sides. Not fists of anger. Fists of a boy trying to hold himself together. He looked at his mother, then at me. The boy who'd been told for 3 months that his father was a thief, that he should cooperate, that Dale was just being nice. The boy who'd walked through a door and locked it behind him. Dad, he said. His voice cracked on the single syllable. Can I see your notebooks? The maintenance ones. I looked at my son for a long moment. Come on, I said. We walked to the workshop together. I didn't turn on the overhead, just the desk lamp. The same lamp that had lit my father's workbench and mine after his. The warm circle of light fell across 28 notebooks stacked on the shelf. Tyler pulled down the first one, opened it, ran his finger along the pencil entries, the way you trace a line on a map to see where you've been. He didn't speak. He just read, page after page, year after year. Every pipe fixed, every lock replaced, every window reglazed, every boiler repaired. The handwriting of a man who showed up every day and wrote down what he did, because the work deserved to be recorded even if nobody else would ever read it. Tyler reached the notebook from 5 years ago. He stopped on a page in November and went very still. He read the entry aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Tyler's classroom, room 214, radiator not heating properly, replaced valve stem and bled the line. Should be warm now. He stared at the page. His finger rested on the words, should be warm now, written by his father 5 years ago, for a classroom his son sat in every morning. A repair his son never knew happened. Tyler closed the notebook. He pressed it against his chest the way you hold something that matters too much to set down. Then he turned to me. I'm sorry. Dad, he said. I'm sorry I believed him. His voice broke. Tears ran down his face in 2 straight lines. I stepped forward and put my arms around my son. He was almost as tall as me now. When had that happened? When had the boy who handed me wrenches grown into someone whose head rested against my shoulder? You don't apologize for being lied to, I said. We stood there in the workshop, in the circle of warm light, surrounded by tools and notebooks and 28 years of a life spent fixing things. Tyler's arms tightened around me. I felt his chest shudder once, then steady. He pulled back, wiped his face with his sleeve, looked at the shelf of notebooks, then at me. Dad, he said. Can I help you fix the gym ceiling? Justice doesn't arrive the way it does in movies. There's no gavel slamming, no courtroom gasps, no villain led away in handcuffs while the hero watches from the gallery. In Colton, Georgia, justice came the way everything else came. Slowly, quietly, one document at a time. Dale Prescott was formally charged on a Thursday, 11 days after the school board meeting. Embezzlement of public funds, forgery, falsification of a government safety report. The county district attorney's office opened an investigation that would take months, maybe longer. Darnell told me the Valdosta file had been unsealed at the DA's request, confirming the same pattern at Dale's previous school. That file would be used to establish a history of conduct. Dale posted bail and left Colton. I heard he was staying with a cousin in Augusta. I didn't ask for details. I'd spent enough of my life tracking the movements of people who'd betrayed me. The school board appointed an interim principal, a retired administrator from Macon named Dr. Catherine Hale. She was quiet, efficient, and the first thing she did was walk through the building with me, clipboard in hand, listing every deferred repair. There are 47 items on this list, she said when we finished. How long have you been requesting these? Some of them, 4 years. I said, some longer. She looked at me over her glasses. Mr. Weber, she said, we're going to fix every single one, starting with the gymnasium ceiling. The contractors arrived the following Monday. 2 men with a scaffold, a stack of acoustic tiles, and the skills to do in 2 days what $1,800 would have covered a year ago. I watched them work from the gymnasium door, my keys jingling at my side. Professional crews doing the job I'd been begging to have done for years. Lorraine and I didn't divorce. Not yet. We lived in the same house, but in different rooms. She moved to the guest bedroom without me asking. We passed each other in the hallway, in the kitchen, at the front door. Not with hatred, not with warmth. With the careful distance of 2 people who know the bridge between them has collapsed, but haven't decided yet whether to rebuild it or walk away. I don't know what comes next for us. I told Megan when she asked. But Tyler needs stability. He needs to know the house is still standing, even if the people inside it are figuring things out. Megan didn't push. She just nodded and said, "You know where I am, Dad." Tyler was different, not healed. Healing is slow, like a bone that needs months to set properly. But different. He came downstairs for breakfast again, sat at the counter, ate his cereal, asked about the Falcons' draft picks, small things, normal things, the scaffolding of a relationship being rebuilt, one plank at a time. One morning he said, "Dad, I'm sorry about what I said on the porch, about not knowing what to believe. I poured my coffee. You figured it out." I said, "That's what matters." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I should have figured it out sooner. You're 16. Tyler, most adults don't figure it out at all." He almost smiled. It was enough. Patricia Bell found me in the school hallway on a Wednesday afternoon. She was still in her scrubs from the clinic, her badge clipped to her pocket, her face carrying the tired focus of a woman who worked 60 hours a week and still found time to come to the school to check on her son. "Mr. Weber," she said, "thank you for telling me the truth about Marcus, for making sure they're fixing that ceiling. No one else would have done that. I should have told you sooner," I said. She shook her head. "You told me when you had the proof. That's better than telling me when all you had was a suspicion." She paused. "Marcus says the gym ceiling looks good. He said some of the guys are standing under that section again." I nodded. "Good. That's how it should be." My lawyer, a young woman from Macon named Abigail Trent, whom Megan had found through a colleague, filed a motion to void the property transfer, forged power of attorney, she said, was grounds for immediate reversal. But the legal process would take months, paperwork and court dates and filings that moved at the speed of government. The house was still in Magnolia Properties LLC's name on paper, but I slept in it every night and every morning. I walked through the rooms my father had built, and I knew the paper would catch up to the truth eventually. Paper always does, if someone's willing to wait. Megan brought Gracie to the school during my lunch break on Friday. Gracie wore a yellow dress and rain boots, even though it wasn't raining. She held a juice box in one hand and Megan's fingers in the other. I took them to the gymnasium. The scaffold was still up. The contractors finishing the last row of tiles, new white panels, clean edges, flush with the grid. The ceiling looked the way it should have looked a year ago. Gracie pointed up. "Grandpa fixed?" she asked. I picked her up and settled her on my hip. "Yes, baby. Grandpa's fixing it." She nodded seriously, as if approving the work, then offered me a sip of her juice box. I took it. Apple. Warm from her small hand. Megan watched us from the doorway, arms folded, eyes bright. Monday morning, 5:45. I stood at the front entrance of Jefferson Ridge High School with my key ring in my right hand. 46 keys, 1 pound 4 ounces. The steel was cold from the January air. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The hallway stretched ahead, polished floors catching the first light from the east windows. Empty. Quiet. Waiting. I stepped inside, and my keys jingled with each step. The same sound they'd made every morning for 28 years and one day, 6 in the morning. January light, thin and silver, coming through the east windows. I stood at the front entrance of Jefferson Ridge High School with my key ring in my right hand, the way I'd stood every morning for 28 years. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists before a school fills with voices. Not empty quiet, waiting quiet. The quiet of a place that knows it will be needed soon. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. My footsteps echoed on the polished tile. The hallway stretched ahead, trophy cases on the left, bulletin board on the right. I'd walked this hallway so many times that my body moved through it the way water moves through a pipe, following a path worn smooth by repetition. I checked the east wing first. Thermostat set to 68. Lights cycling on as the timer kicked in. The first floor restroom, pipe fitting replaced last week, no leak. The fire door in the east stairwell, new spring mechanism installed, closing flush against the frame the way it should. The boiler room, pressure gauge reading normal, the hum of the system steady and even, everything working, everything maintained, everything in its place. I passed the front office and glanced at the bulletin board. My weekly detail sheet was pinned at the top, the schedule I'd printed Monday morning. The same spot where Lorraine used to photograph it and send it to a man who isn't here anymore. The sheet was still there. The man wasn't. Some things outlast the people who try to use them. At 7:30, the buses arrived. Doors opened. The hallways filled. Sneakers on tile. Locker doors slamming. Voices layering on top of voices until the building hummed with the sound of 1,200 lives in motion. Marcus Bell walked past me on his way to the gymnasium. He slowed, touched his forehead where the scar was, and smiled. "Morning, Mr. Weber. Ceiling looks good. It'll look better when it's done." I said. He nodded and walked on, gym bag over his shoulder, basketball shoes tied to the strap. A 14-year-old boy walking under a ceiling that was being fixed because someone had finally listened to the man who'd been asking for 4 years. The day passed the way school days pass. I replaced a ballast in a third-floor classroom, unclogged a drain in the cafeteria kitchen, adjusted a window latch in room 109 that had been sticking since November. Small repairs, ordinary work, the kind of labor that keeps a building alive without anyone noticing. At 3:15, the final bell rang. The hallways emptied in reverse, voices draining out through the exits like water through a funnel. By 3:45, the building was quiet again. I was in the gymnasium, sweeping the floor, when I heard footsteps in the corridor. Not sneakers. Boots. Work boots. Tyler appeared in the doorway. He was wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt, and he was carrying a toolbox. Not my toolbox. His own. A red metal one I'd given him 3 Christmases ago that had sat unopened in his closet until now. "Dad," he said, "I've got an hour and a half before track practice. Show me how to replace a ceiling tile." I looked at my son, 16 years old, standing in a gymnasium doorway holding a toolbox he'd never opened. Asking his father to teach him how to fix something, I set the broom against the wall. We climbed the scaffold together. I showed him how to lift the old tile out of the grid without cracking the adjacent panels. How to measure the new tile against the frame. How to set it flush and press the edges until they seated properly. Tyler held the tile while I checked the alignment. His hands were steady, careful. The hands of a boy who was paying attention. We worked without talking much. The sound of tiles clicking into frames. The occasional direction, 1/4 inch to the left. Hold it there. Good. When the last tile was in place, we stood on the scaffold and looked up. A clean white ceiling, unbroken, flush from wall to wall. No water stains, no sag, no 3-inch scars waiting to happen. Tyler looked at me. "What does it feel like?" he asked. "What does what feel like doing this? Fixing things every day? Knowing most people won't notice." I thought about the question. About 28 years of work that lived in pencil-written notebooks on a shelf. About a radiator in room 214 that kept my son warm one November without him knowing. About a fire door spring that would seal properly in an emergency. About a ceiling tile that would stay where it belonged. It feels like the only thing worth doing, I said. Taking care of something that matters. Even when nobody's watching. Especially when nobody's watching. Tyler nodded slowly. He picked up a tile edge that had broken off and put it in his pocket. The way people keep a souvenir from a place they don't want to forget. We climbed down. I put the tools away. Tyler headed for track practice, toolbox under one arm, at the gymnasium door. He turned back. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "Same time tomorrow," I said. He walked down the hallway. I listened to his boots on the tile until the sound faded and the building was quiet again. I stood alone in the gymnasium, surrounded by a ceiling that was finally whole, and thought about what it means to take care of something. Not just a building, not just a school, but a life, a family. A boy who almost slipped away and came back holding a toolbox. You don't take care of things because someone's going to thank you. You don't take care of things because it's easy or glamorous, or because anyone will remember your name. You take care of things because that's what holding the keys means. It means every door you open is a promise. Every repair is a small act of faith that tomorrow matters enough to prepare for. I picked up my broom, swept the last of the dust from the gymnasium floor, hung the broom on its hook, turned off the lights, walked out through the front entrance, keys jingling with each step, 46 keys, 1 pound, 4 ounces, 28 years of doors opened for other people. I locked the front door behind me, the way I did every evening, checked it twice. Then I walked to my truck in the January cold, started the engine, and drove home to a house my father built, where my son would be waiting, and where everything that needed fixing was, for the first time in a long time, finally being fixed. If this story reminded you of someone who shows up every day and does the quiet work, someone who keeps things running without being asked, tell them. Tell them you noticed. And if you've been that person yourself, carrying the keys and fixing the pipes and wondering if anyone sees, I hope you heard something in this story that sounded familiar. Because people like you are the reason the building is still standing. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for listening. I'll see you soon.